Thank you all for joining us today for this episode of This Ability Podcast. I'm your host, Mary Baudoin, and joining us today is our guest, Latasha Holt, a mother, educator, and advocate in Acadiana. Thank you so much for being here today to tell us your family story.
Yes, thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. So I'm a mom to 3 amazing girls, and I'm a professor in the College of Education and Human Development. I primarily focus on teaching teachers to teach reading. I also have special education in my background. I've been teaching for 19 years. I taught elementary school for 10 years. Elementary was my favorite grades of all, but I've been in higher education for the past 9. Mm-hmm. Besides teaching, I'm an advocate and a volunteer. Some of the things I get to be a part of, I am on the Lafayette Library Foundation Board.
Nice.
I am a board.
You guys have seen a lot of drama lately. Just saying.
Listen, we love to help and support the library. So,
good.
But it's a time for sure.
I'm
also on the board for Danny's Dose.
What is that?
Awesome. So it is a group that works to advocate for emergency care for rare patients.
Okay.
So I can share more about that in a little bit.
Do. Yeah. Okay.
I'm also on NORD. I am a state ambassador for Louisiana. That stands for the National Organization for Rare Disorders. And then I get to do other cool things, like I'm a volunteer for Make-A-Wish. We were a Make-A-Wish family, so I give back to them. And I also work with Hospice of Acadiana.
Wow. So I know you mentioned that you have 3 daughters, right?
Yeah. Okay. 3 girls.
What are their names and their ages?
Awesome. So Blakelee is the youngest. I try not to say baby anymore because she's 15. I have a 19-year-old named Haley, and then I have a 21-year-old named Chloe.
So your daughter Blakelee does have a rare diagnosis of adrenal insufficiency and epilepsy. It's a very rare condition, and I know you sent me a few numbers, and I did look at the website as well. It's really staggering. It's estimated that just 1 in 1 million people have this condition. So can you tell our audience a little bit more about what isolated central adrenal insufficiency is?
It is so rare, and to put it simply, adrenal insufficiency means that the body doesn't produce enough of the hormone called cortisol, which is essential for survival. So you might have heard of cortisol before, but cortisol is so important because it helps to regulate blood sugar, blood pressure. It's what you use when you respond to stress, like your fight or flight, and it's really important when your body is sick or if you're fighting an infection. It really is important to survival. And she doesn't make that hormone, or if she does, very little.
Okay. And there's also an epilepsy component to that?
Absolutely. So, we go back and forth. Like, of course, if the body is having dangerously low blood sugars because of adrenal insufficiency, you're going to have a seizure. That's the body's way of, expressing something's going on. So, we live in silos. So sometimes when I talk to one doctor, they'll say, I think it's the adrenal insufficiency. And then when I talk to the endocrinology department, we'll say, they think it's the epilepsy. But we officially have a diagnosis for both of those things. And as the last few months have shown, we really are seeing that it is a true diagnosis of epilepsy. Mm-hmm. So those are both very complex conditions, and then when you put those together, we really have complex issues to try and overcome.
So, for lack of a better word, is it rare for someone that has the adrenal insufficiency to have epilepsy?
Right.
Okay, wow.
Right, yeah.
So she's got this combination that's even more rare.
Even more rare. And we went through a lot of time of trying to figure out, thank God, there's no tumor, she didn't have cancer, all the difficult things. She was just truly born with not making the cortisol. Mm-hmm. It started about 2, but then we have this extra component of epilepsy. So, yes.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, how is it diagnosed, especially if there's no triggering type of events like cancer?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens is that they call it central adrenal insufficiency because the problem is not necessarily in the glands themselves. It lies more in the brain. And the pituitary gland in the brain normally tells the adrenal glands, okay, make cortisol, which is at a different part of the body, right? And so it just isn't sending the right signals. And that's why it's called central. It's isolated because it's just that one hormone. So you might have heard of like ACTH, and that's where we have things like Addison's and Cushing's disease.
Okay, yeah.
And I can talk more about that later,
Yeah, please.
but it's very isolated into that one part. So for us, we saw about 2 years old, I saw her kind of declining, and there wasn't a reason for it, like dangerously low blood sugar. She'd had a seizure in the night at 2, and I was like,
was she hitting like her milestones as far as
she did
physically growing?
Yeah,
and
she
okay,
did. So
her
there
head
are
was growing.
All of that, we met all those milestones, and there's a couple of different kinds of adrenal insufficiency. And so I'm so thankful we don't have cancer. We don't have other scary types of things that so many others deal with. But basically, when she was 2, I found her on the floor. She'd had a seizure in the night. And so what had happened, I went to Arkansas Children's Hospital, I lived in Arkansas then, which was about an hour and a half from where we lived. And when we went there, we went to the ER because her blood sugar was like 30, 40. Like low, even with snacks. And so I can remember being in the ER that first time, her blood sugar just kept dropping. And so it was kind of like that episode of ER. I think if people remember that show.
I love that
show. Where, they're like bust through the doors, and we were admitted to ICU. But I can remember it was really strange because the doctor was like, okay, see the phone on the wall, like you need to call your family, like you're going to need them. And I was like, okay, we have a healthy, happy little 2-year-old, like what in the world is going on? And we went into ICU, and I can remember them asking me questions like, did she get into insulin? And I was like, how does one like just get into insulin? It was so rare because they were giving her this glucose in her IV, and it really wasn't raising her blood sugar. They didn't really know what was going on. And it wasn't until she was 7 years old that we ended up getting a diagnosis.
Wow. So for 5 years, it was kind of a mystery?
Absolutely. So we would wake up and she would be unconscious. Her blood sugar would be, 20, 30. We would carry her to the hospital. We lived in rural Arkansas, so they would DT glucose IV, and then they would med flight us, or we would go by ambulance to Little Rock, and then we would get there and they would keep giving her glucose like D10 in her IV, and that happened anytime. So the body kind of says, hey, we have a problem before there's a problem. It starts working on it. So she might start plummeting, and then we find out, it was a kidney infection or a urinary tract infection or a cold that she was getting. But during that whole time, when she didn't make the cortisol, she would just continue to get sicker and sicker and sicker. So we would have to basically stay in the hospital until we got through whatever, and they would just run these tests, and they would be like, okay, brain scans, why is this kid struggling? The nutritionist came in, like, is she eating the right foods? Like, are we doing all of the things? But she was just frail, and if you follow me online, you can go back and see like this little frail kid. We went through like food therapy. We had so many scans, dozens of doctors look at her. But one day, and I guess I had kind of given up, like not on her, but like given up on finding an answer because it just didn't make sense. So like I'm a researcher, so I had read and we had talked and I drew pictures. I'm doing all the things to try to figure it out. They would say, oh, she has hypoglycemia. And she did, but clearly it wasn't something that we could address. So this doctor came in the room, and she's from Texas, and she said we'd had another episode, like over the 5 years we'd had, and she said, I've been looking at the years of files that you have. There was a new way that were looking at the blood. She said, I think I've seen one other person like her, and I think I know what she has. Oh. And we were like, what?
Like the skies opened up and the angels were singing.
Really. And so I have a photo of her getting her first dose of cortisol in an IV, and that day like totally changed our lives. Like we have never been the same, because now we had a name for this ultra rare condition. We had a plan, and we had hope, and we had some answers that we'd been looking for.
I'm listening to you talk, and your family has certainly gone through a lot of the trials and tribulations of, the mystery of finding out what the diagnosis is. But how are you holding up mentally?
So It's so hard because as a caregiver, I mean, I have 2 other children too.
Right.
And when we were in the hospital, like a lot of families, it's the travel time. I wasn't in my hometown. I wasn't with my own children. I was a teacher at the time.
Were your other daughters with you guys?
They would visit, but they would be back home.
Yeah.
They had school. And so we were far from family, which made me feel, a wonderful hospital who quickly became our family.
Yeah.
But we felt kind of definitely felt isolated. And my big girls, I call them my big girls, they know how to pack a hospital bag.
Nice.
They are great hospital bag packers. They know how to do that. But definitely, I can remember just my faith and like trying to find an answer. That was big pieces. But for so many years, I just felt like I'm missing something. There's some kind of, and as a parent, I'm like, okay, I'm a failure. You just feel that failure, even though I know I'm not.
Right.
Just not being able to find the answers.
I think a
so
lot of parents go through that too. You feel like a guilt trip, like, oh, I could have done this, I should have done that. But it sounds like you guys went through like a series of doctors too.
So many.
So many. First opinion, second opinion.
Dozen of
third,
opinions. And it's a research hospital. So, wow, they were rounding. There were dozens of eyes looking at her and looking at her files and kind of scratching their head like, what in the world's happening?
Right.
A little more common is Addison's disease. So I don't know if the listeners are familiar.
I'm not.
John F. Kennedy had Addison's disease.
Okay.
And if you look at early pictures of JFK, he was very skinny. And he actually didn't get a diagnosis until he was 30, where he began treatment. So Addison's disease is really close, even though they kept his condition, they kind of kept it secret.
Yeah.
Addison's disease affects other hormones. So Blakelee's condition is just isolated to cortisol, but it's very similar. And then we have Cushing's, which is also very close, but that's where the body produces too much of those hormones. So that's when you have things like, the hump on the back part of the neck, and you'll see the gaining of extra weight and then high blood pressure. Okay. So they checked for all of that, but when they would run those numbers, it was kind of like, there's probably much more complex. So all of those out there who can help me, but the average of those, whatever formula they were using, it would be low, but not crazy low. But it was when they started pulling those hormones apart and really looking at those numbers over time.
Wow.
All those years, that cortisol was like 0.
Oh.
Yeah. So we
sounds
could go
very
back.
scientific, but they're breaking it down. The
Yeah.
computers are doing that.
And we did genetic testing, but that was like 2016, so it was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something. How was that affecting her life? Schoolwork and friendships, and does the family understand what's going on?
We did some early family therapy for sure, because I don't know, if you've been around anybody who has blood sugar issues, the mood changes. And, really quickly the mood can change. So we had to explain to our sisters, okay, so her blood sugar is not okay.
Especially around the holidays, too, if you guys are eating food.
And stressed.
The
stress.
Right.
But it really did affect her, her schoolwork, and we had to really work, and we still continue to do that, to work with, she has a 504 plan, a health plan in place, so that we can make sure if she's not able to go to school. COVID was really scary for us.
Yeah.
There wasn't research on what was happening really with anybody, especially those children who have, or those people who have that. But basically, with these two separate issues working against each other, anytime that she would have a seizure, we also had to go into this treatment plan that we had. And so if I can talk a little bit about that. So she takes a daily pill that kind of mimics the body's flow. So you wake up in the morning and you're big burst of energy, and then midday she gets another one, and then at bedtime. So she takes this by mouth. So if she's ever not to be able to take it by mouth, danger, because she has to have it, right? Whether it be in an IV or by mouth. So if she's to get sick or throw up, or to have some kind of issue with that.
Yeah.
But if she's to break a bone, or if she's to have a seizure, which is something we deal with, we have an injection that we have to give, which I have now. And I think of all the years we didn't have that when she was in an adrenal crisis. So what happens, my dream one day is for the research to really improve around this. There's not a lot of people who have it. So Pfizer, if you hear me, I love you guys. I want to continue to work with Pfizer. But it's not an EpiPen. And it's not an EpiPen that you use. It's actually a vial. So you have the powder and then the liquid part, and it has a plunger in the middle, and then you collapse it and you shake it. And then, of course, if she's having a seizure, you're trying to protect
Right.
her from that. And then you would, after you constitute the medication, then you have one needle that's going to need to draw it out of the vial. I'm not a trained medical. I'm learning.
Right.
We practice on oranges and avocados, and we do all the things, but then it has to be injected into her thigh. So if you don't, use the right size needle, it can break, bend, all of the things like that. So also important to note that if she goes to school, she needs to have that medicine with her. You just have minutes. So, really advocating, it's not an EpiPen. It's not something that you can just injectable. It literally is a needle. Yeah.
It needs to be taken with precaution. It's not just, like you said, like an EpiPen or something that you just kind of use on a regular basis.
That people are more familiar with, for sure.
Yeah.
And I've asked, and I think the medicine has to stay, it doesn't stay good long mixed, so it has to mix on time when you need it.
Right.
And I've really learned a lot about that. Gives me nightmares, so sometimes I really struggle. I worry. I do a lot of advocacy work with Danny's Dose, if I can talk about that too.
Yes, please.
Because Danny's Dose really was established. A dear friend of mine who I met because I didn't know what to do. I didn't have connections, and someone put me in contact with Darlene Shelton. She's a grandmother out of Missouri, and her grandchildren have hemophilia.
Okay.
And so that's the clotting disorder. So what we found out is when you call 911, and this is true when they show up, different states have different rules and regulations about helping. So if they don't carry the medication, trach, Soy-Cortef, which is very rare, the right kind of clotting factor, they may not administer the medicine. So if we were to be in a car accident and I was unconscious, right, we want to keep her medicine attached to the seatbelt with her so it doesn't fly away.
Right.
We've worked on developing Danny's Dose headrests and advocating with our EMTs to make sure we go to EMS conferences and we talk about these rare conditions because they absolutely want to help too.
Yes.
But it's so rare, and sometimes there's that lack of training or grants for training. Where we live in Acadiana, we're super special because Acadiana ambulance stretches a lot of states,
Yes.
which has a lot of different rules. So a big piece of working for Danny's Dose is continuing to advocate because we lose a lot of people. People lose their lives in accidents, things where they don't know. Even though we patient-carried meds and we have our own medications with us, if they're totally unfamiliar with it, they might not even recognize what it is, even though we have the medical ID on.
Yeah. I attended the disaster preparedness workshop this past weekend for people with disabilities, and one of the things that set of parents had for their children who are nonverbal, like my daughter, this could apply to any family, whether they're neurotypical or special needs. It was like a QR code that they created. And if someone on a medical or police force were to scan it, then their name pops up. You can actually do it like in a Google form so that, and you put like their picture in the middle of the QR code. So like for Lexi, it would come up Alexis Barbary, her diagnosis, and anything like any medications that she's on. Especially, I think about that as a parent, like being in an accident, and then what if I'm unconscious?
Absolutely.
They don't know what her baseline is, right? Get in an accident and they're like, well, she's not talking. Well, she doesn't talk normally. Anyway. So, she doesn't walk. So it's something that to do this QR code was like, wow, that's a good idea. And it could be something that, like, whether it's a necklace or a little bracelet or something I put on her chair or a seatbelt strap or something like that. So learning about more of these tips and things is good information to share because you just never know when an accident can happen.
Absolutely. So we actually use our medical ID is from My ID, and they do that very thing. They scan, and it's a slider, so it'll slide on like the Apple Watch. We use that. Again, traditional bracelets are what those EMT you look for, but so I totally agree with you. Part of advocating with your EMT, though, is like building relationships with them. Letting them know where you live and what the case is so that they're familiar with that residence. Making sure that there's awareness because they truly want to help.
Yes.
But I've called and then all of a sudden the firemen are in your house and you hand them medicine and they're like, what is this? You know, they have typical
right.
Protocols that they follow. But
sure.
yes, definitely worry about that. There are a few programs that look at when you travel across state lines, because that's always difficult for us, making sure we have access to a hospital. But also, like, you know, you don't track people like that, but it would be really nice to know if you get 911 call and it's this person, these are the things that they need.
Right, right. You talked about, you know, daily life and management. I was going to ask you, I know about her adrenal insufficiency, you know, medicine. What about epilepsy? Does she take medicine there on a regular basis? I'm presuming so.
We do. And currently we've had a really tough spring, this past spring, so we have been on a lot of medicine.
Okay.
And finding the right medicine for the right type of seizure. Trigger alert, you know, doctors want to see what kind of seizure it is, and it's so hard for me to even think about with the dual situations we have going on to stop and film. But there's a lot of power in filming those seizures so that we can know more about what kind they are and how to treat them. So I've tried to join pages, and it kind of makes me panic. Like, it's definitely a trigger, you know, when I see someone, you know, having a crisis like that. But absolutely. So this whole spring, we have been trying to find the right medication, and then we were actually realized we were on the wrong medication. So getting off that medication is not easy. It's a whole process.
It's a whole weaning process.
It's a whole weaning process, or you can have so many other side effects. And a lot of those medicines are used for other mental health type things. So we have that piece that's happening, that feeling of confusion, and it kind of makes them, you know.
Sure. Some even affect appetite and things like that too, you know, or kidney function. Yeah.
So we definitely try and keep her stress level low, keep her hydrated, eat lots of snacks, make sure that we're doing all of the things so that we don't lower that seizure threshold.
Right. Now, you said she's 15, so neurologically, she functions as a regular 15-year-old?
She's a regular 15-year-old. Okay. She's very 15. She's very bright. She's doing well. She's always done well in school, even despite, like, having missed a lot. She's developmentally, she's done awesome. She's super bright. She has such a bright future ahead, and I look forward to seeing where she goes from here.
Great. I was going to say, though, now she is a teenager, so...
It definitely. The teenage years, everybody who knows about the teenage years, I call my dad often and apologize for my behavior.
Is she dating yet?
She's not, you know, she's girl power, you know. She's not dating yet that I know of, so she'll have to let us know if I'm wrong about that. But she did start back to school in an awesome new building, right? So she's going to have lots of time to make friends.
That's good. That's good.
Definitely.
Can you talk about a typical or atypical obstacles that you go through, I guess, through a normal day? Medication routines, emergency preparedness, monitoring her health. What does that look like on a daily basis?
So the number one thing that you'll hear is, Blakelee, are you okay? Blakelee, are you okay? She probably gets really tired of me asking that. But
how often do you ask her?
About 1 million times a day. And I know it probably makes her crazy, but definitely trying to find that balance. So we keep calendars. I'm very visual, even though there's so much technology. So anytime we are working with a different medicine, we have our calendars. We had to have a system because if she's having a seizure and I've said, hey, did you take your medicine? And I didn't see it, you know, or if she's, you know, we wanted to have a system. So she has a little isolated day that has her 3 times that she takes her medicine. And then when she takes it, she puts it back in, and we have a little drop box, little bucket spot, so that if she's having an episode, I can grab it. Because one time it was stuck in the cool pocket of a Taylor Swift hoodie, and we couldn't find it. And then you look crazy trying to understand, like, exactly what's going on.
Right.
But you mentioned a Google Doc. We did that. We keep a Google Doc of all of the most current information, because when she's having an episode, and I often leave without my glasses or brush my teeth. So we keep binders, but having a Google form where we can keep all of the information so that when we get to the hospital, it's readily available.
That's super organized. But I think that's something that our audience members, especially those that would need something, like they're looking to do some type of organization of, you know, things that happen, whether it's seizure tracking, medication, doing a Google Doc is probably a good way to go.
Of course, you don't want to put anything that, you know, you wouldn't want to put, but typically for us, the name of her pediatrician, you know, all of that information is there. We also have an injection bag, and so, you know, we really want to work with, you know, Kate Spade or someone, like, because there's not a really cool way to store medicine. Her sister... Oh,
hey, I'm all about being a fashionista and getting some cool stuff out there, so that would be nice.
Her sister sews, and she's made her some really awesome awesome stuff lately, but making sure that we have a place her injection can't get too hot or too cold, a place that, any little kid who's around, that we keep it zipped up and that we have all of the emergency orders. But basically, we definitely have that. And then, so we would get up in the morning and she takes her medication, and it takes a little bit to kick in. So she's up about 5 and she's taking her medicine, and we've correlated her cortisol with her epilepsy medicine. So it's one time instead of waking up 22 times to take medicine. We've aligned it pretty well. And then for that part, she's pretty normal throughout the day. Water is dangerous with folks who have seizures, right? So we are careful around bath time, swimming, things like that when you have a seizure disorder. But basically, we make sure that she's trying to be more aware of her own body. So how are you feeling? Seizures are so strange. Like, everyone's different.
They just come on randomly, like, at any time.
Is there a sign? Is there... all of it's an aurora, all the things.
Right. And there's things, obviously a lot of us, in the disability world, we kind of know what those triggers could be, like flashing lights, strobe lights, a loud noise that can certainly trigger a seizure. But it's the days, and Lexi 9 times out of 10 will just have one out of the blue.
So
like
scary.
There's just no rhyme or reason for it. And so it happens, thankfully. For her, it's not too long. Once in a blue moon, she'll have cluster seizures, but that's pretty rare. We do have the Tiostat, the rectal gel, to give to her in case we need to, triage seizure, multi-seizure moment. But for the most part, we don't have to use it.
We have the nasal version
of
it. We've had that one as well.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit easier. We have not had to use it either.
That's
so I'm
good.
very thankful the seizures have been very short.
Yeah.
So basically, when she's not in school, we're pretty normal, but we do try. We keep a wheelchair in case she doesn't, have a lot of energy. We go through TSA pre-check if we fly. We just conserve our energy for her, and we keep snacks. We definitely keep those things. But school is a little bit different. So when we're at school, we have to really front load work with the nurses, make sure we have health plans in place, that she has teachers who are medicine trained, because she can self-carry her meds, but it doesn't mean she can self-inject.
Right.
So we need people who understand my dream. I would love to have a seizure dog. There's not an official dog training plan for adrenal insufficiency, but it's probably really close.
Probably so.
But they're so expensive.
Yes, they are.
Thousands and thousands of dollars. So, but I think that would give her more independence and be helpful. But that's to come. Yeah. So far, we haven't done that.
Is there a message or a call to action for our listeners? And how can families support such rare diagnosis like what your daughter has?
Absolutely. I think the biggest call to action is to get involved, to tell your story, and to listen to others. I know that sounds so basic. We're all different, but we're really all close to being the same. Mm-hmm. So I think when I went through it with Blakelee, I wanted no other family to spend 7 years. And the average is like 7 years, trying to find a rare condition. I think AI simulations will help. Mm-hmm. Actually, I do, so we can train, so doctors can see more of these rare conditions. But definitely advocate for education. A big piece is such community driven, like join the school board, the city council, all of those things, to make sure that if you don't have a rare disease, that you understand the community, those in the community. Make sure that the people around you are being cared for. Mm-hmm. But also volunteering for families and helping. It's very hard to find, when she was really little, someone who can stay.
Oh, yeah.
That feels comfortable.
Well, how does that work with you? I mean, have you been able to leave the house? Let her stay with someone else?
Not lately. We try to be really careful. Her sisters are around, and we keep good communication and contact, but ultimately someone needs to be with her right now, all the time, keeping a set of eyes on her. There are times when, there's a couple of minutes that it's overlap, but it scares me a lot. So but definitely.
But you need to get out for your own peace of mind.
Absolutely.
You need to just kind of take a little bit of a breather too.
Absolutely. But we also do a lot with social media. This podcast is amazing. Thank you so much for the
you're
work
welcome.
that you
Thank
put
you.
into that. But what I'm finding is no matter what job you're in, whether it's business or a teacher or construction, all of those tie to our rare disease community or those with exceptionalities. So even for making buildings accessible, even a ramp at the house to get the wheelchair down, everybody can help with things like that you might not even think of.
Right.
So I think it's really important for whatever function that your job is that you think, okay, how can I help those people? Because you never know, right? When it's going to be you. We just spent time in DC advocating. I was up there working with Patients Rising and also advocating for the Every Life Foundation, but really trying to get in front of Congress and saying, hey, this is what our day-to-day is like. These are the things, because they have big jobs with lots of different responsibilities. So just speaking and listening and advocating, because as you know, when your child gets older, and they're older, and then mom's not necessarily, in our case, Blakelee will be independent and she's going to do great, but making sure that she's set up. I worry as a mom, what if something happens,
I think a lot of parents do.
So I think just like her sisters are phenomenal. We have a great support system that checks in, and they have a different point of view. So sometimes sisters can say things that mom can't say. So
that's true.
We very much have a good system, and we all work together. But basically, the call to action is definitely get involved. When I was in DC, I was able to advocate a lot of the challenges that currently right now is, trying to figure out, a lot of the concerns rather is, how do we decide who gets this need? How do we, we have these many apples, I taught elementary. How do we divide these up and among who? I just think that oftentimes we see people who do misuse resources. And so, but it's so hard when we see families like ours who there's not a certain box to check. For us. So how do we say, hey, this is what we're going through at school. This is, homebound is so important because when we, she has a right to have an education. She has a right to learn and grow. Yes. All kids do, all families do. So how are we going to be able to support her in that avenue? So making sure that we have those resources. I don't think that our most vulnerable populations are the ones that we necessarily want to be, cutting short those families.
I agree,
you never
fully.
know when it's going to be you. Going on a meme, I use this meme in my classroom, and it's these stairs and these kids are trying to get into school, and the helper is shoveling the snow on the stairs because all the kids except for one would go up the stairs, so more kids would get in faster. However, to flip that and just shovel the ramp, everybody could go in at the same time. So flipping that mindset, where we're looking at, Walmart, we don't necessarily pull the handle. We all just go through the door that automatically opens. So how can we be more creative and thinking about ways that we can do what we're doing but serve more than just, your average kid or person. So
I like that meme. I'm gonna have to find that and share.
Definitely,
because that is that's the way that we should be looking at accessibility for all.
Absolutely.
Right? Accessibility for all. Right. What advice would you give to listeners who their child, and I guess anyone in their family, has been recently diagnosed with adrenal insufficiency and or epilepsy, and how do you think that they could stay hopeful, proactive, just getting through the process?
Absolutely. Number one thing I think is to find your people, find your support group, figure out ways that you can stay connected. And social media, although we're getting old, right? Facebook's old for old people. There is a lot of ways that you can work with other people to stay connected. And I think that it's important for us to make sure that you have a system. What works for your family may not work for mine, and share those resources. So there's times when I'll say, hey, this medicine, did anybody heard this? Did you see this? What's happening in your state with this? So finding people, because it's so important, having you as a friend, having people who have things that they deal with, open enough, being vulnerable enough to say, hey, this is the laundry didn't get done. Here's what's happening. Because it's things like, I bought a new house. I was very thankful for that. And I had pulled my car up a little too far in emergency, and I couldn't get the wheelchair. And it was the things like that. And I'm like, and I was so devastated as a parent. And so just hearing, we were fine and it all worked out. But in my mind, I'm like, how can I support find support, find ways that other people are coping and managing and dealing. Also, just advocating for the schools. I'm a teacher. Our schools are so vitally important.
Yes.
To all of us, but those who have exceptionalities and those who are living with those who have exceptionalities. So I think making sure not to forget to support our schools and to support initiatives. And sometimes it's so innocent. So diabetes, you give candy, but not everybody can have candy.
No,
so like
exactly.
flipping that, or when the worst of all that drives me crazy are attendance awards. There are days that Blakelee can't go to school.
No, right.
And then she's the odd person that her whole
Yeah.
class may have lost something silly,
Right.
But that almost double whammies a person who's going through that.
Sure.
Same way. So I think it's really key that in our school systems that we set up little baby democracies, that want to match the world that we're living in, and that we make sure that we're being aware of all that. But finding your people, but being good to yourself. And you always encourage me. Mm-hmm. It is something that I find so much joy in talking and volunteering and supporting. That's what keeps me going, because we could all sit around, and I know and just feel terrible for ourselves, and we have some good reasons to. However, this podcast, things that you do, it's called the Ability Podcast. Like flipping that narrative and really helping us to be kinder to one another, and like understanding. Those are the things I think that's going to bring us the most joy. So making sure that we love on each other, but we find our people, because just yesterday I had an issue with a prescription, and I was like, what is going on? The pharmacy is my best friend and my worst enemy.
Yes.
If you've ever had to fill medicine, So I'm trying to get orders for school, and I have papers everywhere, and it's got to match the bottle, and it's all of these things that I'm going through. And so I'm asking friends, hey, what's happening over there? Is there a generic for this? Why are they not approving that? And those times really help me realize I'm not quite as crazy as I thought I was. So find your people.
No, you're definitely not crazy. And I find that even if it's virtual support, it's a good thing. Like there's Lexi has a rare condition. It's called lissencephaly, right? So her brain is smooth. Her brain stem is formed, but the rest of her brain is not. So her brain has, it's called pachygyria, right? So that's like the ridges and the folds in her brain. And it is a rare condition, not as rare as Blakelee's. But I was able to find on Facebook years ago a lissencephaly support group.
Wow.
And I think now it's grown to 7,000. At the time, there was about 2,000 members, and it's global. I mean, I talked to a mom from Sweden.
Wow.
That has,
Same.
And it's like, wow, this is really amazing. I know that social media has pros and cons, but especially when it comes to the special needs realm, you can find whatever that diagnosis is that your child has. You can find a group on Facebook for it, and I like to join as many as I can.
Join them all.
Yeah.
You can always leave them.
Yes, you can always leave them, but someone might post something and it's like, yes, I can relate to that, had that same issue, or no, I can't relate to that, but thanks for the heads up.
Absolutely.
It's a good tool. And then it's nice to also talk to other moms, even though in Acadiana, I don't know of another mom that has a child with lissencephaly. There's other moms that have, their child has cerebral palsy or autism or Down syndrome. There's a common thread.
Absolutely.
We're all moms, and it's a different way of life. And they understand if they come to my house and the flower beds have a lot of weeds in them.
It's perfectly
fine,
yeah.
Mary, it's okay.
Who needs those?
Yeah.
No.
Sometimes I need that affirmation, right? Because I feel like the HOA in our subdivision is kind of like, Mary.
Oh, I'll help you out, friend.
Okay, good.
I love it. But no,
come
absolutely.
to my house and pull weeds. I'll give you a daiquiri or something.
Thanks. That's the Acadiana way. No, but absolutely. I think it's so important. And even I was in some of those, I'd mentioned her low blood sugar, and I was in a lot of hypoglycemia groups. See someone who's like, her blood sugar, I'll say, oh my gosh, check her cortisol.
Right.
Check their cortisol. Check for this, check for that. Ways, use this resource. Being in the hospital, there's so many caseworkers here. So many people call. They've connected me with so many here in Acadiana who do things and who help, and who have helped, us with getting paperwork done or knowing the process. They'll call me 2 or 3 times, say, hey, what you need, what do you got going? So absolutely, I agree. Join the more, and just having a voice. Don't be afraid. Share.
Absolutely. What organizations, I know we talked about on social media, but are there any organizations here locally that you've been involved with?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a lot of national organizations are also on the smaller scale.
Yeah.
So Epilepsy is huge, right? So there's a lot with epilepsy. There's lots of events. But currently I've been working with the RDAC, which is the Rare Disease Advocacy Council.
Nice.
A lot of the states have those. It's kind of a subset of NORD.
Okay.
But we had our first day at our capital here in Baton Rouge where we all got together. It was wonderful. I was just got to be a part of it, but we all come together and looked at rare diseases and advocacy. They lit up we have a beautiful capital, lit that up, come all together, and like we had booths. We had booths from, hospitals, but we also had recruiting for special education teachers. We had all kinds of resources that came together to really celebrate, but also to build those communities. And then on a national scale, there's things like scientific symposium that we went to for NORD. But I think just looking at your local level, things that you can do, especially here in Acadiana, there's all kinds of the dyslexia groups have runs and supports and all different kinds of things that they do so that you can find your way. But most of all, think about things that I've been trying to really hard think about things that are missing and how can we add to that. What is my specialty that can help with that? Whether it be, working with students at school or however. But absolutely. So the RDAC is something that's really important to me that I've been working on lately. Make-A-Wish is cool too. They do lots of other things, but we have different subsets of Make-A-Wish.
Okay, I was going to ask you because I know that's a national or maybe even international organization. Let's say someone locally in Louisiana wants to get involved with Make-A-Wish, whether it's to nominate someone, to get a wish, or to volunteer. How do they do that?
We have so many kids waiting on wishes.
Okay.
So we need volunteers. So currently right now we have Make-A-Wish. It's actually, we're in the Gulf South, so it's out of Houston, but they come do lots of work. So I went to Stoller to one of the breaks where everybody come together and we worked to celebrate and raise money for Make-A-Wish every year in our Mardi Gras parades. There's a wish kid. So definitely look into Gulf South or whatever area of the country that you're in, and it's kind of on smaller scales, you can volunteer. So it's so simple as you just help walk kids through the airport, or you go interview children and ask what their wish is. It's so much is needed. And even like with Hospice of Acadiana, I've done some work with them, the No One Dies Alone program. It's not even necessarily related to rare disease, but you find amazing people. We are so blessed in Acadiana. We have so many people, family that just treat you like family and that want to help. So even though, it's different, but just volunteering there, passing out shirts, t-shirts, medals, whatever you can do, I think because you build those connections and you find that support, you find that everybody has a story. Yeah. So Make-A-Wish is awesome. Again, I mentioned Danny's Dose. We're always looking for ways to partner up and take our EMT some donuts, do those things support them because we want to celebrate them too because they're very important. You never know until you're going to need them how important they really are.
So yeah, mention those organizations again, and they all have Facebook pages, or I'm guessing websites, link trees,
absolutely.
That kind of thing? Okay.
So you can check out their websites. We also have Facebook pages and on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Also, your local hospitals will tell you ways to get involved with child life.
Okay.
So many opportunities. So I think just doing a little hunt for some of those, NORD, just how you can get involved, and then looking into ways. Like you said, it may just take your time.
Right.
It may not take a lot of money if you don't have a lot of money to give.
Right. Okay, so we're wrapping up the end of this interview, which was very informative, and I don't really want this interview to end. Like, I wish we could just talk forever. But I wanted to ask you, what gives you and Blakelee, and I guess your whole family, hope, and what milestones are you guys wanting to achieve next?
Absolutely. So I think for us, we are super excited that we have such good medical care available to us. So that's a big piece. We've been really looking at seeing the glass half full. So really pouring into the fact that we can manage this. It's tough, but we can manage it, and that there's a plan. So I think we're really mostly excited about having a plan and finding out what that looks like. I worried about Blakelee being able to drive. I don't think she really wants to drive anyways. A lot of kids don't want to drive right now, actually.
Really?
A lot of them.
When I was 12, I wanted to drive.
Same. But no, a lot of kids don't really want to drive. So making sure that, things that, we want to do, what does that normal life look like?
Yeah.
How can we support I work on a college campus. So how can we support on a college campus? So I think, faith is a huge big piece, but also realizing that we can manage it, that we can do that there's a way. If you don't like your medicine container, let's 3D print one. If you don't like that bag, let's get someone to sew you a different way.
Nice.
whatever it is that you're dealing with, like thinking outside of the box of ways that you can solve that problem. Advocating at school, telling our story, making sure that Blakelee will stand up for others, that are different than her. But like that brings us hope, that brings us joy. Also doing things like this, like finding ways that we can share our story, finding ways. I have a chapter in a book coming out this fall, ways that we can just make silly videos or whatever that really share our story that gets lots of views. Actually, just
you recently did a video for those listening. I'll share it on our Facebook page, but she talks about the IEP process and putting together. Well, was it the IEP or was it the IEP?
It's the same bucket. It's the same process. So it was a 504 and a
504. All the forms that are required for medication and I guess emergency preparedness and just every single, like documenting almost every single thing that your child could do. You have to put it in writing, and it's a lot. And then the doctor has to fill it out, and then you've got to send it to one doctor and this one, that one. And it's a lot.
It's a lot. So yes, I did. I made that video because I understand just piles of paperwork and navigating it. And I'm like, we got to figure this out.
Yeah.
But it's got to all match and it's got to all align. And so, but definitely like finding out ways that we can support each other and get through some of those tough challenges and laugh about it. Really a big part of my newest found enlightenment, I guess, is grace, having some grace on myself. Like I do great things, but I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to, lose my cool every once in a while, and I'm going to be sad and I'm going to be mad, but giving myself some grace, because it's like you said, I definitely need a vacation, but moms don't always get none of the moms get a vacation, but I definitely think like just giving yourself some grace and making sure that you're being good to yourself, whether that be walking or, I need to walk more, but
just for me, taking a nice hot bubble bath.
Absolutely. Whatever it is. Like, I know it didn't fix everything, but, just being good to yourself is very important.
Just a few moments of the day or of the week or whatever it is. A good nap.
And letting people know that you need that.
Yeah, definitely. One thing we didn't touch on, and I'll just kind of quickly ask you, because you have mentioned it throughout the interview, is the importance of faith in your life. Tell me about that.
Oh gosh, so faith is so important because I'm very smart. I say that. I'm very smart. I have a few degrees.
You do.
But there is a time when I don't think our brain can understand. That's where I think faith comes in.
Yeah.
So like...
Yeah, because it's not tangible.
It's not tangible. And like, so I love science and all of that, but I think there is a place where you have to like realize that maybe you have to lean on God, and that higher power. And if you can get quiet enough and still enough and listen, you'll find him in the most unique ways. Yeah. Things that, something will happen very, special that maybe only you and God
I was going to say, do you think there's been some divine intervention at any point?
I really think that, absolutely. I think that of all the things I thought I would do in my life, not necessarily did I think being this kind of an advocate, probably you yourself, but getting to meet people like you, getting to work with people in our community, those pieces I think have been a way for something that's really difficult, because everybody has something difficult. I mean, different.
Yes.
That to turn it into a way that people go, oh my gosh, like that really helped me.
Yes.
So I think like that's where all things work together. And also just taking a moment and being very thankful for the fact that as tough as times are, I'm so thankful for medicine. I'm so thankful for New Orleans and those amazing doctors that we have, or wherever you are in the world, like really seeing the blessings in the small pieces, because everybody's dealing with something. Yeah. So I think looking for God in those places, in those moments, because it really is about faith. Because okay, so I was stuck on the bridge, the Basin Bridge, in an ambulance the other day, and I was like, this was it. Like I was just, it was such a terrible moment, and I can remember just putting my head down and thinking, this is where I could lose it. I could absolutely lose it.
And for those listening, if you're not familiar with the Basin Bridge, it's the bridge, it's a 20-mile bridge that goes from Baton Rouge to Lafayette, and it's part of the interstate system of I-10. So when you're on it, there's a frequently amount of wrecks, usually from an 18-wheeler. There's a lot of big trucks because it's an interstate system, right? And a lot of trucks coming and going from Baton Rouge and et cetera.
That Basin Bridge, and thank God for air flights. But as we're in that moment, and I thought I could lose it. I could really lose it right now. Those lights come on and the sirens came on. and we started just doing what she said, navigating through traffic. And it started to get easier. And I was in the back of the ambulance, and as I looked out the back, the truckers were making a way.
Really?
And they were kind of
in those big trucks.
Those kind of, they would kind of,
wow.
They had to be, because it was just like, well, hey, here they come. And it was like, here we weaved through. And I was like, thank you.
That's amazing.
There's so many things, even though I was in the back of this really bad situation.
About to lose your cool.
About to lose my cool. But like looking at those moments and realizing that we have some really great people in this world, and that God really blesses us with people who come in our lives. Yeah. So the Basin Bridge is a struggle.
He cleared that path for you.
There was a path, because it was very scary. And again, there's only so much you can do in an ambulance. So, but finding God in those little moments is really important.
Well, great. All right, Latasha, last question. Is there anything you'd like to leave with our audience today? Anything that we did not touch on, or anything you just want to reiterate?
I think I just want to reiterate how thankful we are for you in this that you do. I know that it is not something that comes easy. I'm like looking around in awe of all the things that you have worked on to make this so great.
Thank you.
So I think the outlet of sharing, however that is, whatever you can do to share and kind of follow your lead on some things, it's been very inspirational, because we have to learn how to take care of each other.
Absolutely. And I encourage people to, starting the podcast, I've had other people say, I've thought about doing a podcast, but I just don't have time. Make time. I encourage people. I don't look at it as a competition. The more special needs podcasts that are out there, the better. There are some that are out there now, but when I first started, I started like years ago, just kind of researching. There weren't that many.
Right.
And especially if there's someone that has a rare disease like lissencephaly, or other things, they might not have a lot of resources. So talking about those, it's a great way for people to exchange information and to learn from each other.
And we're thankful for you for that. So
thanks
for having me.
Thank you. Absolutely. All right, everybody, this is going to close out our episode of this Ability Podcast. Latasha, thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Sure.